we're like doing this pose where we're just like, ah. Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? Welcome to episode 13 of Restitching the Tapestry. It's kind of hard to believe we're on episode 13, and I already see some people tuning in, so that makes me happy. Um, Taylor, Taylor, Taylor said, "I'm heavily drugged and angry at the establishment. Let's go." Yes, yes, I love that.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so this, like, as you can tell, like, the episodes that we've been doing have been focusing on like very specific large establishments lately. And this one we wanted to dedicate to talking about higher education and how higher education is kind of turned into more of like this business type institution geared at generating dollars instead of, holding steadfast to the, I don't know, the respectability of education as an institution itself. Okay. Um, Hi, Igni. I'm doing well. How are you? Arpy's like, tats are unprofessional. I think tattoos are beautifully professional. So, before we get started, of course, I'm going to read our show's mission statement. So, many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us. And much of the time, many may feel powerless and know not how to address those things. This fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media, being able to share a trauma and having it go viral in real time, where people can experience it collectively on a mass scale. So, what can we do to mend the communities that have seen this considerable tragedy? Most of the tragedy often being initiated by privileged groups who may not understand their personal involvement. So, that's the question that our show poses typically. So, our goal is to restitch the tapestry, one could say, together through educating via conversation, creativity, and action. So, this topic specifically for this episode is pretty um, significant to me. So, and it's affected both Ari and I in different ways and in some similar ways. And I know it's affected some of you watching this in some ways as well. So, first and foremost, Ari, how are you doing today?
I'm great. So I know that some of you know this. One of my poems got selected for publication this week. So
Yes.
I'm in a really good mood this week. So yay, me.
I know, it's
Uh,
so exciting.
and Donnie and I are both going to be in the same publication. So
Yeah,
we're pretty excited.
this publication is coming out in November, and it is themed around protest and rebellion. And we both wrote very rebellious poems, and we're really excited to have them featured. It's honestly, and we were talking about this before the episode started, we're just super excited to have our names be put together to be occurring in the same book. Because, I mean, ever since we were in college, um, we've always been very creative souls, right? We were always like collaborating on things, like writing in each other's journals. Just, I remember there was one time, I know this is kind of a digression, but it's all in good fun because it happened in college. It's themed around the show, right? Anyway, um, I remember there was this time in college where we were like plotting to create like this um, indie publication. Do you remember that? We think we were going to call it like Underground Magazine or something like that. But we were set on this.
I remember this. Yes.
Oh, that was so fun. That was just fun, and it feels like a full circle kind of thing. So, yay.
Yeah.
Um, So, oh, Lacey says, congrats. It's good to see you, Lacey. And David's here too. Good. We have 8 people on. Yay. That makes us happy. So, before we get started, full force in our topic, make sure that you go subscribe to Ari's channel, Strange Nothings. Subscribe to mine if you haven't yet. Click like below. If you were watching after we're done doing the stream, don't hesitate to leave a comment if you would like, because we do look back at those comments and appreciate them. Okay, so let's talk about higher education. So the reason why, obviously the reason why we thought about this topic as a whole is because, I mean, I am in student loan debt. I have,
A ton of student loan
yeah,
debt.
like I have a lot of student loan debt left over from my undergrad. And now, don't get me wrong, I would still go back and do it. I really enjoyed my experience. But like after I did my undergrad, I went on to do my master's, and of course, I have some student loan debt from that as well. So, like, and this is something that is going to be with me for 10 years or more. All right. Mind you, it's already been with me for about 10 years.
Mine's probably going to be with me for another at least 20, although my sister and I are talking about, because of my disability, getting that written off, but the chances are pretty slim, but like it's a possibility, but like maybe not. But I have it on hold, and I've been having it on hold for the last like 4 years, and I haven't paid on it at all.
Mm-hmm. I know mine, like because of the pandemic, mine has been in like forbearance as well. So I mean, it's been nice being alleviated of that temporarily. But I mean, if you look at how much student loan debt people have compared to whether or not they have a successful job in their career that pays well, like it doesn't happen as often as we would like to think, and it doesn't happen as often as we're often told will happen. Like I will admit, I am in a unique privileged situation because I am working in a position in my field that I've always wanted, and it has allowed me to, I don't know, thrive, which I mean, I appreciate it. It does make me happy knowing that I am doing what I love to do based on the education that I got. But at the same time, like looking at the size of that debt, it really kind of makes us have a double take, a double glance when it comes to like why is education doing this? What are the problems in higher education? Why is it turned into this type of institution that seems so focused on cost increases, tuition hikes, so on and so forth. So I think what we should do first before going into our discussion points is maybe talk a little bit about our college experiences and what it was like juggling like jobs and finances, so on and so forth, because I think that might conveniently lead into a couple of the things that we'll have to talk about in a little bit.
So, for my college experience, I didn't immediately go to university. I went to community college for the first 2.5 years, almost 3 years of my college, because I wanted to keep my costs down. So, I didn't, I didn't have those high tuition rates for the first few years. Uh, so it really helped keep my tuition rates down. So I was working, and I was studying the first 3 years at community college. So then when I finally transferred, because I got my associate's degree, and then when I went to university, I knew what my major was going to be, and I was already set on. I knew what I was going to do when I moved to university, and I still was commuting back to my hometown to a job where I was working a few days a week so I could get some of my tuition paid for the first year. And then I was like, I can't do this anymore because this is too much work. So the second year, I really was focused on being a student. And that's when my tuition rates really went up because I wasn't working at all. I was strictly doing student loans. Um, and it's really hard when you're just taking tuition out and you're just taking that money out and living off it for a semester for the last 2 years. And in those 2 years, I racked up about $30,000 worth of student loan debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel that pain. I feel that pain. My experience differs a little bit. I did not go to a community college first, although I almost did. Um, the reason why I didn't is because that was a point where I was coming out of the closet, and I wanted to get away. And my only way to get away would be to live at a campus, and a lot of community colleges that I looked at didn't have the option of on-campus living. So that was mostly my decision for choosing a campus or a university to go to. My first 2 years going to university, I only had one part-time job, but it was in my hometown, and I would go and work it every other weekend. So obviously that was not a livable income at all whatsoever. I chose to stay on campus for all 4 years. So I lived on campus because I worked on campus eventually. I ended up getting a second job where I was working as like a deskie at for one of the dorm complexes. So I had to like do security, check people in, all that, which was
I remember
nice.
that, yeah.
Yeah, like it was nice, and I really it was never boring, that's for sure. But like again, that was minimum wage, and when you compare that to say $300 a credit hour, and I'm taking like 15 credits or so, like that's a lot. That's a lot of money. I had financial aid, of course, but even my financial aid wouldn't cover all of it. So um, I remember like the worst it got was probably my second year of college, where I had to have a family member take out. Well, I didn't make them do it. They like literally, it was down between me being dropped out of college and them helping. They had to take money from a life insurance, like part of my life insurance, to pay for textbooks and part of my tuition. So it really was frustrating at that time. And I remember being very upset over it. But at the end of the day, I think it all worked out. Um, as like Tiffany mentions that she is thankful for her degree, but I wish I had gone into a trade and not had college debt. Like I sometimes think that too. I am thankful for my degree. Then again, um, like for me, like in my field, like I don't think going to a trade school would. I mean, I don't think there would be jobs for me in my particular area looking at that. But and it's interesting, like I mean, we could have a whole nother episode about like public universities versus trade schools and like the pros and cons of each, because you'll find people on both sides of that. But yeah, overall I came out of my undergrad experience having over $50,000 of student loan debt. um, I've paid off a sizable chunk of it, but suffice it to say, it's still a pretty large sum because, I mean, there are interest rates on them. And in the grand scheme of things, by the time you're done paying on those student loans, you're really paying like
Paying
close
double.
to like 80,000 to $100,000 on them, which really sucks. And I try not to think about that, but I mean, it's simply the truth, right?
It's sort of like you're just digging a hole. It's sort of like when you go to the beach and you're digging a hole and like there's water going in the hole and you just keep like trying to dig the hole, but like you're just not getting anywhere.
Well, that's an excellent analogy. Like it just like, yeah, it just keeps refilling. There might be an indentation, but it's not like what you want, right?
Yeah. It's
D-
it's just muddy and terrible.
exactly. David says, I also wish high school financially prepared students. They truly fail at this, balancing checkbooks, interests, loans, how to calculate. I agree with that. I really feel like, I mean, I can only really look to my experience, but I've also heard this from a lot of students, of my own students as well. Like going into college, like high school, because they're so focused on standardized tests and meeting, quotas in order to get funding themselves, like they aren't always able to teach students very important, you know, life learning lessons of like finances and this like processes for like taking out loans and like you said, balancing checkbooks. So let's see here. I'm keeping an eye on the comments. Lacey, that picture, I'm trying to remember when you had bangs like that. My niece goes to MSU and they're doing everything online for the first semester at least. Tuition is more this year. Yeah, cost hikes. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit too, but I remember there was like a fruit fly. What the hell? Anyway, I missed it, I think. I can't even see it. But so I remember being told by an academic advisor that my graduating class was the last graduating class where I went that had like a locked in tuition rate, which meant that my tuition rate did not rise. It was like capped off at like a 300 and some odd dollar per
Yeah,
credit.
mine was captain too.
Yeah. But I remember like underclassmen who were like freshmen the time that I was a senior, their tuition rate had increased by like $75 to $100 compared to mine in 3 to 4 years. So that to me like is mind boggling.
Yeah.
And of course they, like many of them, were very much um feeling the pressure of all of that. Taylor says, my high school offered finance classes as senior year math, super jelly. Like, like that sounds like it would have been helpful.
That would have been really helpful.
Yeah. Tiffany says, I was so heavily pushed when I was in high school to get into a university and sign all the loans. I was not mature enough at that age to make such decisions. That's a very important point because there was, and I think in some ways there still is this expectation of, okay, you're done at the high school level, you need to immediately go on to a university and get a higher degree to prepare for a job. When really, I mean, one, a lot of people aren't prepared to do that because they're not taught various aspects like we were talking about. But additionally, it kind of locks students or like people in general in this one track where they can't consider that, there might be like trade schools or field experience that you can build in positions that
I
may
think
help
that
you.
we have to note that this is something more of the white middle class experience, white middle class to upper class experience, that like when you are in school that they kind of push you to go to college, but when you're in the white lower class and also when you're in um the BIPOC experience, it's not that experience at all. They don't push for you to go to college, and they don't really want you. They don't really push. They push for more military experience. So, but when you're white and you're middle class to upper class, they definitely are like, "Are you gonna go to college? What's the next thing? You're gonna go to university, right?"
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it is very important to consider that based on the group of people, it is drastically different for sure. And in many ways, like our experiences are very much privileged compared to other people's experiences too.
So it definitely is socioeconomic that whether or not you do go to college, or that they push for college, because uh, you know, I went to this school in Mona Shores, which was kind of like the nicer school. And when I grew up, I went to Oak Ridge, and they didn't really push for college in Oak Ridge, but when I went to Mona Shores, it was like that was like the natural progression of like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college. And when I was at Oak Ridge, they really didn't talk about going to college. It was like, you got your degree, now it's time to get a job.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, so Tiffany also mentions, and this is an important thing to add on to what we've just been saying, her experience was based on parents not having degrees. So she is a first generation college student. Like a lot of children of boomers are first generation college students, because like the boomer generation was definitely more focused on, well, I mean, and granted, they had more accessibility to getting jobs, without needing to have a college degree, right? So for us, like those expectations changed, and it got a little bit more challenging. I am not a first generation college student. My mom has a degree from a university, and my dad has a degree from a community college. So they both went through some track of higher education, but there are a lot of people whose parents haven't, and that definitely affects one's view of higher education and its significance as well.
My mom went to college just as I was going to college. So she was like in her 40s just as I was about to go to college. So it was like this really weird situation.
Mhm.
So she's like in her 40s as I'm like coming into my like 20s or like my teens. So like it's weird like that I'm like studying in school and she's like studying in school. And it's like she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get my degree," and it's like, "Okay."
That sounds like a unique experience.
It is, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about tuition rates and what they've looked like over the past 10 years. So Ari, would you like to introduce us to that?
Oh, man, so, tuition rates have gone up about 25% in the last 10 years, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Some of it has to do with superfluous spending, but not a whole lot. A lot of it has to do with cost of living, apparently, uh, but it has a lot to do with um, be, there are just a lot of different reasons why it's gone up, but um, basically, I don't know.
Well,
It's
competition, like I really think competition is a huge one. Um, because like if you look at universities in an area, Lacey's like drink that White Claw, always have one at the ready, right? Um, um, if you look at given schools in a very specific like area, because enrollment has gone down, because the economy is doing better, well, if we ignore the pandemic, which it's not at this time really, but in a non-pandemic time, our economy was actually improving. And the odd thing about education is when the economy is improving, fewer people go to school because they are able to snag jobs, right? So because enrollment has dropped in a variety of different places, um, that has forced colleges and universities to become more competitive with how they advertise themselves, with how they reach out to students. And essentially, they're fighting over the business generated by um, student enrollment, on campus living, concessions, so on and so forth. So, It's very interesting, and it definitely is a reflection of how like education has industrialized largely.
Yeah.
I have like a hiccup coming. I drank my White Claw too fast. First world problems. So were there any other reasons why?
Oh, there were cuts to college funding from like the government, so like cost per student has gone down. So like they don't get as much from the government, so like students kind of ate up the cost of that. So it's sort of like they don't get so private universities don't get money from federally, so like they have to eat up the cost personally.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, and there used to be much more incentive from the federal government for like for students, and that has decreased, like you were saying. And unfortunately, I think that that reality has been a little bit disguised behind like the cost of living rising, because I know that people try to focus on that more so than the fact that, well, actually there's less incentive from the federal government to go to school, or less resources, fewer resources. Ignore my horrible grammar today. Um, so I think, I mean, if we kind of look at some context here as to why that is, and of course, I was talking about the economy back in 2008, 2007, 2008, of course, when we went through the recession, right? Um, like there was a pretty huge boom in the education field. Like there were a lot of people going to school because they may have been laid off from work or they lost their jobs. And I mean, the only thing that they had to do was go to school in order to get a higher degree that would give them more access to opportunities, right? Well, that, like, of course, there was this huge boom, and now, like, the bachelor's degree itself has kind of lost its luster, let's just say. It's kind of taken on the same power as a high school diploma because more businesses are expecting um, people to have a bachelor's degree as opposed to just a high school diploma. So that's put a lot of people in a very difficult situation, because as they were getting their bachelor's degrees, as the um, job market became more oversaturated with people of those qualifications, those industries or those like employment institutions continued raising their requirements, which made the fight to get a job even more competitive. So, I mean, those are a few variables as a result of the recession in 2008. But we can see it now because, of course, since our economy has improved over the past several years, um, again, fewer people are going to school, and now colleges and universities are, receiving less funding largely. So,
Yeah, it seems like the number of people going to school has sort of dropped off, hasn't it?
mhm. Yeah, considerably. And the pandemic has made it really bad too, because a lot of people, understandably, are very hesitant to go to school right now because it could potentially be unsafe if it's face to face. Other people don't want to do online schooling. So they, like, I know a lot of people are wanting to do like a skip year where they just skip this year and go back to school again when the pandemic lifts, hopefully, whenever that happens. Um, so, like, it's made an already difficult environment, a difficult environment for education to thrive, more difficult, if that makes sense. So, let's see. Do, 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 do.
But
Um,
the side effect of that is Gen Z isn't going to be educated.
right. Or they're going to be in even more debt than millennials are, which is looking to be a possibility, unfortunately.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah. And it's really sad. It's really sad. Is there like any other historical context that you want to touch on about how like education has shifted from how it used to be versus now?
So back in the 70s, like the 60s and the 70s, uh, it seemed like you could just like work it's like the historical context was like you could work all summer at a summer job, and like that would provide enough money to like pay for all of your school expenses. It could pay for your room and your board, and it could pay for your food and activities for the year. And that seemed to be like the normal situation for colleges. And like that was kind of how it was, that like you would get a summer job and that was how it was. And like usually it would be like working in a factory or some kind of job like that, and you would do that for the summer.
Hmm.
And it would pay the bills. And that seemed to work. And it it worked for a while, and then there was some inflation, and it didn't work anymore because the cost of living went up, and it didn't cover expenses anymore. So you couldn't get a summer job and just cover all of your expenses for the whole year. It made it so that it was very difficult to do that. So you had to cover those costs with student loans, and then student loans made it so that it was like this magical, like taking out a credit card almost, where you would just pay later. And like when you got a job, which magically there were jobs when you got out of college, you could just pay it back as you went. But then all of a sudden, with our generation, there weren't the jobs that we were looking for. It wasn't guaranteed that you were going to find a job when you got out of college. Like it was kind of a guarantee, or that there was this probability that you were going to find a job with Gen X during the tech boom. So like they seem to be able to find a job, and they seem to be okay, so they could take out student loans, and like the student loans that they were taking out were seemed to be okay, and they didn't take out very many student loans. But with our generation, it seemed like that wasn't happening. So we kind of got screwed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like, and it's interesting how you mentioned that historical context, because it's very clear that the cost of living had something to do with that too, and
Hmm.
how it just seemed to spike over the years. And I think once people started realizing that education could be this huge moneymaker, that also added in a very complicated um, layer, you know? So, going back to talking about the competitiveness of education, I think it's also important to talk about pay gaps in education in different positions, and how like certain members of the institutions will make considerably more money than others. Um, so, for example, there are a lot of graphics out there about like academic salaries, how they differ between one another. And this was from a few years ago, um, from a site like off. It's from an article in the New York Times, and when it comes to looking at academic salaries, typically, tenured professors would make on average around, if they are men, 95,000 a year annually for a salary. If they were women, 86,000. Okay, and of course, untenured, about $20,000 lower than that. As you look at like administration, like they make up into the $100,000 range, up until like the university presidents or CEOs, where they make about like maybe a couple 100,000 or more. But if you look at football coaches, for example, at some of the highest caliber universities, actually, this is not just at those universities, they're at most universities, they are able to make twice that, if not more, than
Oh, I thought you were going to show the graphic.
I was going to show the graphic, but it's not letting me embed the photo
Oh, okay.
for some reason. So I will post a link down below so everyone can see that after the show is over. So you'll be able to see it. It looks like a few people are having some internet problems. I know Igny was having an internet problem. I'm sorry, Igny. But just looking at that difference between pay, like it's alarming.
Mhm.
So like literally a college or university football coach can make darn near $1 million a year, whereas a professor full-time tenured makes under $100,000. If we go even further and examine adjunct faculty, who are essentially part-time faculty hired in without any benefits, without a salary, they're just given stipends based on how many classes they teach. If they teach a full course load that a full-time faculty member teaches, they make maybe $20,000 a year or less, which is living at or below the poverty line. So it's really alarming to see that a person can go and get not only a bachelor's degree but a master's degree and get a job in their field, but still only get that much, in return, pay wise. So, and Taylor said that getting tenured is very much impossible. It is very impossible because the
It
truth,
used to be possible, but it's not possible these days anymore, it seems like.
right, right. Well, it's extremely competitive. A lot of institutions don't always open up tenure track positions anymore because obviously that means they'll be paying more into those positions, not only when it comes to salary, but also like benefits too. So like it's really unsettling. And Taylor says that's why I'm heading for a PhD, because of course that added qualification would weed out much of that competition for sure. Yeah. Yeah, Taylor said she only makes $6,200 per class.
Or 2.6 per
Or did it
class.
at 2.6, I mean. Slightly dyslexic when it comes to numbers, I apologize. So yeah, that's in the grand scheme of things, if you look at all the work that teachers have to do, it's not like we're just coming into class in our, blazers and fancy glasses with a cup of coffee in our hands to just talk a little bit. No, there's a lot more than that, like there's preparation, there are meetings, there's professional development expectations, like there's a whole slew full of different things. So there is my spiel about pay gaps in higher education. So I guess what that would it begs the question of, well, why is this a thing? Like why is there such a difference between in pay? And there's been some studies about that, but when you look at, say, football coaches making that much money, it is those sports programs at universities generating those universities a ton of money as well, because sports attracts a lot of attention, not only in the media but throughout communities. And unfortunately, not only does it bring in dollars through like ticket prices, but also concessions, but it also is a convenient marketing tool for institutions to get their names out there on a grand scale. So I think that's why there's such a priority placed on that. And it does seem problematic. And unfortunately, I think that's just another symptom of how education has become very much industrialized.
They prioritize, I mean, it's entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah. Like entertainment sells. Yeah. Taylor says, I mean, I do walk with a blazer and a coffee and fancy glasses. Same here. Same here. Like it's funny because I do really like the pandemic has made me miss dressing up sometimes.
Well, you've got class next week. You'll dress up next week.
Right. Like I like it's like honestly, like I still sometimes will dress up for like Zoom lectures. Like I'll either like if I'm feeling really lackadaisy, I'll probably wear something like this. But usually I'll like wear like a button up and a tie and have like a cute little mug with a saying on it or something to set the academic mood. Oh, Taylor,
Oh my
I
god.
adore you. That lecture is going to be iconic. I'll drink to that.
Perfect.
Except Ari's a little bit more classy and has a cup of tea.
Because I'm hungry for phallic symbolism.
Oh my god, I need a moment. That broke me. Oh. If there are ever moments where I think there should be quotable parts of the show, that definitely was one of them. You took the Olympic gold medal of quotable moments.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Oh. So, so do you like what do you want to talk about next, Ari? So, you
Let's
did
talk
mention
about
something about
universal basic income.
yes, go for it. Take it away.
So I feel like we could solve a lot of problems with tuition in college with universal basic income. I feel like uh, it would, if we had universal basic income, it would solve problems with room and board. It would solve a lot of problems with just it would I feel like it would just solve a lot of like basic problems with like just college in general if we had just a UBI because it would cut costs down in general.
Right.
But
Like it would definitely equalize things a little bit more and make things more consistent across the board, I think.
right, and that it would just cut the costs down to the tuition hours in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then it would just be you're paying for the credit hours that you go to the class.
Like I think some institutions are doing that in some degree by switching from credit hour to contact hour. Contact hour being like paying for that face-to-face time itself. Um, I like honestly, I'd have to do research on the successfulness of that. I'm not 100% sure. So, but that is an interesting thing that we'll have to look into because I know it's largely newer because those conversations have been now just happening in a lot of places. So, um, Taylor, my poor students, I'm bedridden, so the most fancy thing they're getting from me is a bra. There's nothing wrong with that. I know, like I've literally done lecture videos from like my very comforting like comforting like chairs that probably make me way too comfortable. But I have yet to um be in a like comforting bed situation doing a lecture video, but it sounds like you have no choice at this point. So that's totally understandable. So, so let's talk a little bit more about what millennials are going to do about student loan debt in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Okay.
I'm hoping that we get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez into a higher office because I like the things that she's saying about student loan debt. She's talking about possibly getting rid of or getting rid of student loan debt for millennials or having some kind of relief package for millennials. And that's possibly in the next 10 to 15 years. I think that that's probably going to happen, that we're going to need a bailout.
Yeah.
I think that we're just not going to be able to manage our student loans. I think that we're just going to be managing because of the interest rates because people have like $150,000 student loan debt from universities, $75,000. We're just kind of like circling. People are just not paying it off. It's just hanging around. We're like indentured servants. I have $30,000 and it's just I'm not paying on it because there's no way to pay it off. So I'm just kind of hoping that like maybe that they'll just kind of do the credit card and go, you're forgiven.
Right. Right. I know like some states have tried to do some things to alleviate student loan debt. Like some states, for example, have passed legislation where if you're working in like a state-driven office or like institution that you can get student loan forgiveness after you work there for a certain number of years.
I
Again,
feel like that doesn't go far enough.
oh yeah, I think it's definitely just a small start. It doesn't go far enough at all.
But I feel like if it because I feel like it doesn't help enough of us who have issues with our student loans because I like we're suffering. Like people are just we need help. And I feel like it's a problem that's just going to keep compounding year after year for the next 20 years. And we're going to get to a point of where it's going to explode. And it's only going to get worse with Gen Z, who's going to get compounded. And then with our children, the millennials' children going to college, it's going to get compounded because they're not going to be able to go to college because of student loans.
Either
So
because student loans or education is going to be so devalued that going to college might seem just like not a productive thing, that which is kind of scary to think.
it's just gonna compound. It's just we're gonna put our debt onto the next generation. So um, we're either gonna have to have a universal basic income for the next generation so that they'll be able to go to college, or probably we're going to have to do that. Plus, we're going to have student loan forgiveness for our generation. So, it's just going to take a massive effort in order to get rid of to take care of everything that's like the problem right now. And it's going to be like such a massive effort and it's going to be so ridiculous. And right now, it's like not even conceivable to people universal basic income is like so beyond us right now. Like it's not even like something that's on the table right now. like, no, like, people are kinda, like, talking about it, but it's, like, such a foreign concept to our political leaders, like, they're not even talking about it in a real sense of, like, something that's possible, but they will in 10 years.
Right. Well, I think at this point now, most of them might think that it might be something too radical to talk about because, I mean, if we look at politics right now, there seems to be this eagerness to sling around the word radical
Well,
to like,
because we just got universal health care, and
mhm,
that's just something that we just got, and that took 20 years, and
right.
so and
And
that's
and there's
not
been
it's not
efforts
even
to
universal health care.
right, like it's not even it's by all means far from perfect and there have been many efforts to disempower that too. So, like, I mean, I guess the frustrating thing about the situation we're in is that if somebody does come up with a solution to help improve tuition rates and like the educational institution itself as a whole, like everything is so fractured that there are going to be large swaths of people who resist it because they might fear or they're told to fear that it might cost them tax dollars or something to that effect. Because we live in a time where a lot of people thrive on like fear mongering and like misleading rhetorical tactics that prevent people from understanding how certain things function and the benefit to helping certain individuals, certain not individuals but groups of people.
I'm just wondering, like, at what point did they decide to, like, privatize our student loans? Like, where they sent them to private companies? At what point did they decide to do that and, like, send us off to, like, the wolves?
That's a good question, and I think that happened in. I mean, I think we'd have to do more research on it. But if I were to propose a theory, I would say that it would be in the 2000s when the government realized that they were running out of incentive funds for education. So, in order to capitalize on people going to school during the recession, that's when they privatized it more. Taylor. My main question for this episode: how miraculously are Ari's new publication and Donny's new book going to fix the broken college system? That's a good topic to write about now that I think about it.
Well, my poem is called Mad Revolts.
uh, which is something maybe we need to do in order to fix, the education system as it is. So David says, my thought of expanding AmeriCorps as a way to utilize a generation for service for the country, and that way people can contribute back. It shows people's taxes are returned to them. I think if people were able to see that more distinctly, that would definitely help. Now, the only problem is that, like, again, because of all this fear mongering, people might see a return of some sort, but they'll always, like, I think they'll have the fear in the back of their mind of, well, what am I not seeing? What's happening behind the scenes? Because that seems to be a very powerful force right now, unfortunately.
My friend did AmeriCorps, and she said it worked really well for her, and she went to Alaska and she helped build a library. She worked in a library in Alaska,
Wow,
and
that's really cool.
yeah, she did such a good job. And she had a lot of fun doing it, and she stayed in Alaska for a really long time. I think she's in Washington now, but she had so much fun working in Alaska, and she wanted to stay because it was so diverse up there.
Mhm. So it can definitely be a rewarding experience. So see, there are like opportunities out there that can help people. It's just knowing where to look
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Now, do I wish that those opportunities were a little bit more widespread? Yes. Um, is it unfortunate that those opportunities have to exist to counteract the sheer steep prices that exist? I mean, it's unfortunate to a certain degree, I'd say. Um, so, so this is an interesting question. Um, does a university have an obligation to students to make sure they succeed in the world past college?
I think they do. I think that a college has an obligation to its students. I think that they, um, I think ideally what a college should do in order to help students succeed is that when a student graduates, they should be assigned a caseworker, someone who will follow them for however many weeks and help them find a job, or at least like follow them on their journey towards finding a job, and like help them develop the basic skills that they need to help that, because when you go to school, they don't really teach you. I was taught the skills I needed to find a job my last semester of school. That was my capstone course. My one of my last courses is that I had to do the basics of an interview. I had to fill out a resume. I had to basically search for jobs, and I had to do the basics of how to find a job in my field. And I don't think that they teach you that in uh most majors.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, because I mean, Taylor thinks that it's not the university's obligation. She says that universities are obligated to offer tools, but it's up to the students to use those tools effectively. And I think that balances off what you were just saying, Ari, because a lot of the time nowadays, those students aren't taught how to use those tools effectively. Right. And David follows up by saying, I think a balance, but you also need to balance students' own responsibility too. Um, and then, of course, the university should be about knowledge, not a job machine, liberal education, not a job ticket. And I think, like, so that is an interesting point that Taylor just made too, because I think that kind of opens up an additional area that I think complicates education as a system nowadays as well, because in our country, we're so focused on the day to day 9 to 5 grind of job being the American dream, right? That the liberal education has kind of lost its luster because of that. And like, I mean, in order to improve education, there might need to be a large, sweeping mental shift when it comes to how we perceive ourselves in a working world. That's going to be so hard to do because, of course, like it's a conditioning, right? What do you think about that, Ari?
It's interesting to think about, and they do say with universal basic income, the way that we perceive jobs is going to change. That we're not going to have 9 to 5 jobs. That the way that we do jobs is going to be completely different. That if you want to work, you can. If you don't want to work, you don't have to. So, I mean, it is going to change with a universal basic income. So, I mean, maybe I do have to change my preconceived notions about the way that we work, but I do think that the way that universities run things, I feel like they do need to help students at least in some way, um, with their ending process a little bit more than they do, because I feel like when you graduate, it's like, here you go, you're off in the world, now just figure it out. And it's like
Right.
they don't do anything at that ending process of, well, well, what's next? And it's
It's
like,
like it's like you're thrown into the deep end of a pool with a pair of flippers, but you're not taught how to put them on or use them.
right. And I feel like they don't offer any sort of like advice or tips on how to survive in the real world. And I feel like they don't they don't offer you kind of like steps on what to do next.
Right, agreed. And like I do know that some colleges and universities do offer something, but it's not universal by any means. Like I know one of the places I work at actually has an employment program where graduates can call and request like access to job listings that the university compiles, and they offer like advice counselors who can kind of like advise and like guide them in directions, maybe give them like resume tips, so on and so forth. Like even that, while it might be something small, is better than nothing. It provides some sort of post graduation security.
But you have to call and request it. It's not something that like is like generally like how well known is it and how well offered is it and how many students know about this tool.
Right. Taylor brings up an excellent point. She says, sure, but you're also an adult with an education. You can ask those questions as you go and prepare yourself. And I think that's a good point too. But the truth is, how does one arrive at those questions if they're not taught to ask those questions, and that could simply be, I mean, that could be something as deep as like a parental type of thing, like our parents teaching um, their kids to ask the right questions about finances, about job preparation, Um, but I do think that self motivation is a learned experience too, right? Like it's clear from this conversation, and I think that everyone in the comments would agree that there needs to be some form of self motivation on the students' parts in order to motivate themselves to ask those questions, to learn more about the experience, and know what resources they can reach out to in order to help better their chances of getting a job.
But if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah. And there are many variables that might contribute to not knowing too. And I think a
Right.
lot of it is realizing that, I mean, not all ignorance is willful.
Right.
Like there is legitimate, like some things that people just do not know how they work because they've never had any life experiences that have exposed them to.
Like I didn't find out that Central had a job placement center until almost 5 years after I graduated.
Really?
Really? Yeah.
It's funny. I didn't know that they had one until you just mentioned it.
They had something that I could have used when I graduated, that they had something that I could have been using all along. Um, but I didn't know about it until there was an incident with a student, and I signed up for an alumni service, and then they had mailed me all of their services that they offer to alumni that pay, and one of the service was job placement services.
Interesting. You know, did the alumni service did it require like some sort of fee to join it? Okay.
Yes.
So interestingly, that's another way that the university is making money. But it sounds like they were trying to put the right foot in front of them by like showing that, hey, like, yeah, we're going to be making money off from this service, but we'll also attempt to help you in some way. So, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. Because that is almost like a part of the big machine that's industrializing things further.
It cost me like $30 to become an alumni for a year, but like, yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's not a huge, I mean, for me, like in my opinion, that's not a huge fee, but to others it might be.
But I also like had the chance to like stay in the alumni house for free and like there was a lot of things and like I was able to walk in the parade if I wanted to and just like a lot of things that I could have done.
Oh, well, that's kind of cool. I didn't know that. See,
Yeah.
you learn something new every day about your college experience. So,
And they got like a
David,
little pin and it was great.
now a pin would win me over because I love me some pins. I used to collect pins. That was one of my most ridiculous pastimes, but
All it
hey,
costs is $30 to be a gold member.
they even attach like a designator to it, a gold member. Well, that makes me feel special. So David says, I think also because high schools have become standardized test factories, they have lost the ability to teach that which may classically have been learned more. Agreed. Like there was a priority shift, right? And the truth is many of those standardized tests make institutions money as well. Because I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of standardized tests that cost a lot of money, a lot of money. So let's I mean we're probably nearing the end of our episode here. So let's talk a little bit more about how like all of this can be improved in some way. So um Ari poses the question of if a college does have an obligation to students, what can they do to help better accommodate students in the future? Succeed past the obvious. So, having a program like that would be helpful. Are there any other things that might be helpful that a college or university could do, you think?
I think teaching students along the way on how they can manage their tuition. I think that like or managing their finances. I think that like teaching them right away on how to manage their tuition, having like a comprehensive course on how to do that um, would help because if you don't know how to pay for college if you're just signing up for stuff and not knowing what you're signing um and just signing the bill and like you're signing your life away like before you think about it like I mean you're signing up for like a lifetime of like misery and not thinking about it maybe you should really like and not paying attention to the loans you're signing um and not like checking the loans that you're signing like I think that like having like a literacy class on that would really help students especially like 18-year-olds who are signing away their lives maybe would be beneficial
Right. I agree. It's
especially ones that sign up for like credit cards and stuff too and pay for their textbooks with credit cards.
right. It's interesting that you mentioned that because there is like a lot of like colleges and universities will have like a first year experience program where like students can like take those classes or it's like usually a class or an extracurricular thing where they can like learn how to live life in a university setting. I think it wouldn't be a far stretch to include some sort of unit on managing finances and understanding, decision making for job placement past college, Like I think students should be taught upon entering college that they need to be looking at the bigger picture and the long run instead of the immediate moment that they often get caught up in. So, um yeah, like David also added like exploratory courses examining salary, occupations, majors. Taylor suggests a sugar daddy program. Oh, I would have loved that in college.
Wouldn't we all?
Sign me up.
No, I I think that like having programs like focused on like just literacy programs focused on like just like life skills, like just on just like the basics of like what you need in life. Um and just having it maybe just like maybe an extracurricular and like having it be like something that you could do. Um
The extracurricular would also encourage self-motivation, right? Because they wouldn't be paying for it, so that would mean they wouldn't be obligated to go, but if it's, like, recommended by people, so on and so forth, that might be enough to help them create the self-motivation in order to go, right?
mhm.
So, um, so a few other ways that I think it's important to help higher ed kind of preserve itself or to improve itself. Number 1, vote for politicians with public education experience who will help ensure the continued success of students and faculty. I'm going to flat out say that I think that the current Secretary of Education um, is not helping the education system very well. I really do think that we need somebody in who has public education experience, not just private education experience. So maybe somebody more well-rounded who, like, doesn't want to turn education into, like, this business construct, but, like, help it kind of retain the liberal arts significance it used to have. Um, I also think helping perpetuate through conversation the importance of education is very important because if we look at um, how people value education now, it's extremely devalued. People, especially during the pandemic, if we look at that as an example, are you know attempting to discredit professionals in their fields. They view education as being this liberal thing that's being weaponized against religion and like other institutions when it's not, right? So like taking that idea out there that education isn't intended to do harm but to help people grow, that I think is important. Um, if you're an educator, administrator, or student, continue to have conversations about education as an institution, its growth, its change. I think a lot of people are discouraged in talking about the growth of education because it is such a big institution, right? I mean, like kind of like talking about the military industrial complex, Ari, like we were talking last time about it being such a large thing, like it's hard for people to pinpoint the problems and the solutions. I think that's very much the same with education too. It is a very large institution, right? With a lot of different um like
I I think college, yeah, because it's like with private education, it's like you have each of these institutions doing their own separate things. And so, but as a whole, they're raising tuition rates. They're doing things that are not to the benefit of students. Um, they're making poor decisions that are um, not good, and they are causing problems uh, that are having long term effects.
right, exactly. So like I think in all of what we talked about, like all of this could be used as some sort of contribution to a solution. The truth is, the solution is going to require all hands on deck. It's going to require a lot of fortitude. It's going to require a lot of willing participation from different groups of people. And and I think the first step in doing that is by fixing the division that's taking place right now. Because like all of these things are very much interconnected, even though we may not always see it or realize it.
Mhm.
So, any parting words, Ari, for our friends today?
Um, Hey teachers, and I teach students how to be more versatile in their finances.
Yes. And also encourage basic life skill like priorities, self-motivation, so on and so forth. So before I end our episode here, a couple of updates. Next week, since it's going to be a holiday weekend, Ari and I are taking a break for a week, and we'll be back the following week. So, and that week we're going to be talking about essential workers. So like every few episodes, we're going to just take a break, to like enjoy our Thursdays from time to time. Not that this isn't enjoyable, of course, but
It's been 13 episodes. We need a break.
like it's important for creators to recharge every now and then, right? Because we already have the next dozen episodes plotted out, so we have all those ready, like performatively a break.
Right. It's Labor
So
Day. We want a break.
right, exactly. We're gonna. I might barbecue because it's Labor Day. That's what you do on Labor Day, right? I don't know. So one other thing, depending on how my school schedule goes, we might shift to doing these Friday nights. So keep an eye out. I will notify you all when that'll take place. We are definitely heavily leaning potentially toward Friday nights. Okay. So anyway, we love you. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe to Ari's channel if you haven't yet. Subscribe to mine, like the video, comment afterward, give us some love, or even debate with us if you disagree. We love a good conversation. So anyway, have a good rest of your night, my friends. Bye.
Bye.